teacher.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about the novel Of Mice and Men. And I know Ms. Vasquez had already told me that you guys have already been reading about some of its background to become familiar with the novel. But today we're actually going to go a little bit deeper to finding out more about its background and context, and so that you can better understand the novel, where it comes from. Now, do any of you know who wrote the novel Of Mice and Men?
And it's Scott Fitzgerald.
Oh, good try. I mean, he was a great American author, but good try. Anybody else?
John Steinbeck.
Excellent. Yes, it was John Steinbeck who wrote the novel Of Mice and Men. Excellent. Okay, thank you. So we're going to actually go in a little bit deeper, find out more about his life with a PowerPoint presentation. So let's go over the presentation together. Okay, so some key points about the presentation. Now, John Steinbeck, he was born on February 27th, 1902 in Salinas, California. Growing up, he was an avid reader, and he decided to become a writer at the early age of 14. And as a teenager, he worked a lot on ranches and helped with a lot of the field and handwork. In 1919, he went to Stanford University, where he studied for 6 years before leaving without a degree. And then in 1929, something known as Black Tuesday, or the stock market, happened, which really affected America's economy. And this sort of kick-started the era of the Great Depression, where John Steinbeck's novel Of Mice and Men is taking place in that time era. During this time, he produced his first novel called Cup of Gold. Later, he produced his second novel called Tortilla Flat. And in 1937, he wrote his groundbreaking novel Of Mice and Men. And this helped gain him a lot of commercial success, and this allowed him to become a full-time writer and start his writing career. After he produced Of Mice and Men, he then created in 1939 Grapes of Wrath, which does have similar themes to Of Mice and Men. Grapes of Wrath is his most famous and critically acclaimed work of all time.
Then why aren't we reading it?
The reason we are reading Of Mice and Men is because it's actually, we have more time to go over it, because Grapes of Wrath is a little bit lengthy.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Of Mice and Men deals a lot with its characters, which is about migrant workers. And during this time period of the Great Depression, those people who came from the Great Plains, such as states from Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas, had experienced a lot of drought and poor weather. Their overproduction of farming led to an erosion of soil, which was not good for farmers. So a lot of these farmers moved to California. And California seemed like a promised land, and there were many reasons why people moved there, including its very fertile soil. And in 1943, John Steinbeck, he married and had family. And then in 1962, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. And in 1968, he died at the age of 66. So these were some key points in our PowerPoint. This was our PowerPoint presentation on the great author John Steinbeck. So the next thing that I'd like to do with you all is we're going to go over an activity and actually create a timeline. Who can tell me what a timeline is?
It's an illustration that represents an event or life of a person and shows their milestone.
Excellent. Very good job. Yes. A timeline is a linear representation that displays important events in the order in which they occurred. And today we're actually going to be creating one. So first, I'd like to start off with my title. And my subject for this timeline is going to be the Great Depression. So we're going to start off with our title. And I'm going to title this timeline, the Great Depression. And who can tell me when the Great Depression started?
With the stock market crash.
Excellent. And do you know what year that was?
In the 1920s.
Yes. Just like our PowerPoint said, it was in 1929. And who can tell me when the Great Depression ended?
With World War II.
Excellent. It ended for America when World War II started for us, and that was in 1941. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is create a timeline, or rather, we're going to do our line. So this is our timeline, and we're going to go ahead and add some milestones to our timeline. Who can tell me what a milestone is?
An important event or accomplishment.
Excellent. Yes, a milestone represents an important event that happened. So who can tell me an important event that happened during the Great Depression?
A stock market crash.
Very good. Yes, the stock market crash was very important. And what year did that happen?
1929.
Excellent, yes. This happened in 1929 and was also known as Black Tuesday. And who can give me any more examples of what happened?
World War II.
Very good. Yes, and when did that happen for the U.S.?
1941.
Excellent. Do you remember when we entered?
1941.
Yes. What happened is on December 7th of 1941, Pearl Harbor was attacked, and that is when by the Japanese, and this was whenever the U.S. entered into World War II. Okay, and can anybody else give me any more examples of what happened during this time period?
FDR.
Yes. In 1934, FDR was elected president. Very good. Any more examples?
We were poor.
Yes, throughout this entire time period, we were very poor for Americans, yeah. Anything else?
The New Deal.
Yes. He did pass the New Deal during 1930s, 34. Anything else? Okay, so these are some important milestones that had occurred during this time period. This is an example of how we would create or start to create a timeline. Now, to give you all an example of what a completed timeline looks like, I actually created one for you so that you can get an idea of what one looks like.
Ooh.
At the end. So here I did mine on the Great Depression. So I have my title, the Great Depression, and I have the 10 important milestones that have happened. So we have the stock market crash in 1929. We have in 1930 the Smoot-Hawley Thrift Act was passed, and in May the Federal Reserve's funds bottoms at 1.5%. FDR is elected. 1934, the Dust Bowl happens, where the Dust Bowl is a 3-day dust storm that blows an estimated 350 million tons of soil across the country, devastating agriculture. In 1934, the New Deal was passed, and then we had Pearl Harbor, and then finally the end of the Great Depression. So this is how a timeline would look. Next, we're going to be actually doing or recreating a timeline. Can anyone tell me what timeline they think they're going to be creating with us today?
Is it on John Steinbeck's life, like the paper said?
Yes, exactly. We are going to be doing a timeline for the author's life. And I'm actually going to be pairing you all or grouping you all into groups so that we can recreate a similar timeline. And the teacher has provided you, or Mrs. Vasquez has provided you with a paper with the author's autobiography where you can actually find your 10 milestones of important events as well. And before we all get started today, does anyone have any further questions? Okay, fantastic. So let's begin our practice.